In Glasgow, we've seen a significant deal between China and the United States. Some analysts and commentators are saying that this further isolates Australia in our position. What's your response to that?
Oh, well, I completely reject that, and I warmly welcome the agreement and the statement that has been made by the world's two largest emitters. The fact that China has not increased its scale of ambition in relation to the COP26 discussions and is still sticking to a net zero by 2060 position is something that we would like to see change. We would like to see and hope that this type of discussion between the US and China could bring China to a position that Australia holds and many other countries hold in terms of achieving net zero by 2050. We hope that the type of cooperation that may ensue under this statement will enable China to make that decision. We know that what will drive them towards that will be the type of technology and cooperation that is envisaged in this statement between the US and China, consistent indeed with the different agreements we've signed as a country, be it with Germany or with South Korea or Japan or a range of international partners where we're embracing technological cooperation, because it will be those breakthroughs in technology that enable the big emitting countries, 3 of the 4 largest emitters in the world, China, Russia and India, all of whom are holding out in terms of a 2050 deadline, to perhaps bring forward their positions if we can get those breakthroughs in technology that enable them to see cost-effective pathways to reduce their emissions whilst preserving their economies and trying to grow the lifestyles and standards for people in their nations.
The host, Boris Johnson, is saying he wants some nations, including Australia, to revisit the 2030 targets and to strengthen them by the end of next year. Will the Morrison government agree to that?
We lodged in the lead up to the Glasgow conference a new update in relation to our nationally determined commitments that provided the trajectory demonstrating that we're on track to meet and to beat the 26 to 28% reduction target that we'd put, that we're on track to achieve 30 to 35% instead. We certainly welcome all countries of the world seeking to not just meet but to exceed the commitments they've made, and what we'll continue to do as a government, as we have always done, is to quite transparently, in quite a detailed way, release the regular updates in relation to Australia's emissions profile and the trajectories in terms of how we're tracking in meeting the commitments we've made. And if we can further exceed that 30 to 35% reduction that we now see is possible, then of course we will strive to do so, because that's what we've sought to do at every juncture in meeting and exceeding our international climate change targets.
Minister, the New South Wales Treasurer and Energy and Environment Minister Matt Keane has said that New South Wales is signing on to the UN COP26 declaration to accelerate the transition to zero emissions vehicles by 2040. Will the federal government approve that? What
we want to do is ensure that Australians, just as they have embraced the choice of being world leaders when it comes to having rooftop solar, also embrace that choice when it comes to transitioning to lower emissions vehicles, electric vehicles, hybrids, hydrogen vehicles, the different suite of options that we expect to see increasingly come onto the market. And so we have complete confidence that Australians, when they're given effective choices there, backed up by the infrastructure in terms of charging infrastructure in their homes, at their workplaces, particularly support for how we manage the electricity grid to underpin that charging infrastructure, will make the transition to lower emissions vehicles just as they've done so elsewhere. And we're seeing more and more such vehicles come on the market, and we're determined that we will provide that effective support for Australians to make that choice as they get those options available to them, with the infrastructure and the resources and the facilities necessary to embody and enable that choice.
But just on the Matt Keane and New South Wales government commitment, will the federal government give approval for them to sign on to that UN declaration, with federal government approval now necessary under law?
Well, there's a process in place in relation to states and territories making international agreements now. That process involves them working through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and I'm sure they'll go through that properly. And of course that will receive the requisite normal assessments. In that regard, I wouldn't want to prejudge or preempt what the assessments are, but we are certainly there in terms of wanting to see Australians have absolute choice and empowerment to embrace electric vehicles or other low emissions vehicles. And the way we do that best is by ensuring they've got the infrastructure and the facilities to be able to do so, and an electricity grid that enables them to do so. And that's what we're investing now some $1.2 billion in, I think, in total, with the additional commitments that were announced this week.
That was Simon Birmingham, the Finance Minister. I caught up with him a bit earlier this afternoon.